Hi, everyone. This is Kim. Sorry about that. I accidentally hung up. So far on the line, I see Carl, Chad, Randy Looning, Joe Benkert, Mark, Don, Nate, and Dan Hawkins. Is there anybody on the line that we didn't announce?
Joel Estes.
Oh, hey, Joel. All right. 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, and in the room is our team, Tony, Sarah, Ed, and Kim, and then Brian Sena with Department of Corrections. I said that right?
Right.
Okay, very good. Is also with us. So we'll go ahead and get started. Chief Tade will not be on the call today, so I'm going to go ahead and run through the meeting really quickly. Because we don't officially have a quorum, I will ask for approval of the August 2018 meeting minutes via email. But did anybody have any questions or concerns with those minutes? Okay. Colorado Broadband Office update. Tony, I was going to give that to you.
Yeah, it's fine. And hello, everybody. I just want to give a quick update. There's really not a lot to report at this point in time. As you guys might imagine, we're in the initial stages of the transition to the new administration. So most of the effort that we've been focused on here has been around preparing transition documents for the incoming administration, and there'll be a series of meetings, I assume, over the next 60 days or so as we go through that transition. We try to make sure that this group as well is kept up to date to any changes or decisions that get made with the incoming administration. I mean, we don't anticipate that the new administration will de-emphasize any of the efforts that we've been doing, either from an overall broadband effort or the work that we've been trying to do with the first responder community as well, because I believe they will continue to see those as being very important. But if there's any changes, in direction or focus for what we're doing, we'll surely communicate that to the broader group as well. But that's really about all I can tell you at this point. We're just in the very early stages of that effort. The incoming governor has established his transition teams, and we'll start having meetings with them next week, and I'm sure we'll continue on right through the inauguration, which I believe is on the 7th or something like that of January. So if you guys have any questions, just reach out to me, and I'll try to help you understand anything if you feel there's things you'd like to know about what's going on. All right.
All right. Thanks, Tony. Next item on the agenda is the Public Safety Broadband update. First, wanted to talk about the October 1st governing body meeting with FirstNet and AT&T. We were not able to record it, and for those of you who weren't able to participate, we wanted to just share with you kind of some of the outcomes of that. The purpose of the meeting was twofold. It was for AT&T and FirstNet to provide a brief, what I'll call network deployment update. It was very high level, and to give us some statistics around what their network deployment through that time period and really through the end of 2018 looks like. And then the larger discussion was around the FCC interoperability document that had been filed by this group through Brian and then been rescinded a week later back in July, and the concerns that the group had around interoperability, around mission critical interoperability in the future across networks. Quickly, I want to talk about the network deployment piece. There's essentially, so AT&T asked that information not be shared outside of that room, but I was at a public meeting with AT&T yesterday, and they were sharing statistics about Colorado with that group. So I am going to share with you what they shared publicly at the meeting yesterday. Around the Band 14 deployment, they plan to deploy Band 14 at about 458 sites in the state. Through the end of 2018, they anticipate having deployed Band 14 at 136 of those existing sites, which will leave another 302 for them to do by FOC, which is the end of that 5-year period in 2022. They also have about 208 roaming sites that they'll be finalizing relationships with those carriers, and they haven't said publicly who those carriers are, although generally we know who the roaming carriers are in our state. Again, so 208 roaming sites, which really was a huge section of both the eastern and western portions of the state when you look at it graphically on the map that they showed. They also advised that to date, there had been over 50 public safety agencies or other FirstNet eligible agencies that had subscribed to the FirstNet services on AT&T. And by user type, and if you count connections, they said that they had 1,781 primary user connections, 760 extended primary user connections, and 348 subscriber paid connections, which I believe are essentially their version of BYOD. So that approaches over almost 3,000 connections. That would be device connections across more than 50 agencies in terms of adoption. They won't share publicly which agencies are subscribers. They said that that's related to consumer privacy issues. So our office will have to work with agencies as they subscribe, and we're trying to figure out how that information can be gathered in a way that isn't cumbersome and then shared back, because I think one of the important elements of this is agencies knowing who is using which networks and how that impacts their operability and interoperability across broadband technology. So that's something we'll be working on in the future. Some other topics they said that they were working on in the state were site hardening. They were doing strategic identification of sites that had to be hardened by a generator in addition to the battery backup that's at all sites. They're focusing on site acquisition for the new builds, those couple dozen sites that they promised here in Colorado. They're focusing on in-building coverage, which they stated publicly included the new Denver 911 building, focusing on band 14, and then they did state that the 2 sat colts that were in the state, promised to the state, are in fact in the state, but they actually might have been recently deployed to California. So while they're promised to the state, they are certainly used in situations where, they're needed, and California certainly is an example of that. So does anyone have any questions on the general statistics I was able to glean at a public meeting? Okay. The last half of the meeting, and I would actually encourage any discussion from those of you that were present, like Dawn or Dan or Nate, I'm not Dan, Carl, sorry, on the interoperability issue, kind of some of the high-level points that were taken away that we took away and that Emil took away, the consultant who participated via phone, who wasn't able to be on the call today, is that AT&T's network will be the only solution that is guaranteed to be managed by FirstNet. FirstNet has no interest, and AT&T has no interest in having relationships with other carriers from a core-to-core interoperability perspective, and that will never be supported. So as a group, while that was a concern and issue we desired to have addressed in the FCC filing, I think, and the group, I think, discussed it as well at the meeting, that it's time to perhaps just move past that point and look at how interoperability and concerns around mission-critical data can be addressed in other ways. AT&T is actually in the process, and I believe they just published an article about it yesterday in the trade magazines, which I will share with all of you, that they are looking to make mission-critical push-to-talk a service in 2019, the second half of next year. They still have not announced who their partner is to do that above and beyond Motorola. The article that I will share with you talks mostly about Motorola, but they are working with a software-based partner who is yet to be named, who will also provide the mission-critical push-to-talk service using the 3GPP standards in Release 13. Starting in 2019. We heard they might make an announcement on that later this year, but we aren't sure yet if that will occur or not. In this article, they talk about things like proximity services, which in the LMR world is the equivalent of simplex or direct or fireground in some instances. And that article also talks about the challenges associated with that. So I think it'd be good information for all of you to understand, because while they're rolling out NCPTT with bells and whistles, I think it will not certainly be for a long time an apples to apples comparison with how simplex works on LMR. Another thing that we took away from the meeting is that we brought up the use case of a user on another network using AT&T's mission critical push to talk application. And so that might be something that they go back and think about and talk about within their strategic roadmap, and how maybe that would benefit or hurt their network. I think we just don't know the answer to that. Some of the other things that we surmised from the meeting is that they don't believe until there is a problem with mission critical push to talk or apps that promise public safety related push to talk across the networks, that they are effectively, they are being used effectively for the time being. So what that means is they're not concerned about a problem that hasn't occurred yet. They aren't opposed to addressing the problem if it has occurred, but they believe the crux of the issue filed by the group to the FCC, because it operationally hasn't impacted anybody, they aren't wanting to put resources towards solving that problem, independent of the core-to-core issue. They are open to deploying VPN services to other non-Verizon carriers, and they are pursuing the use of a published API for client interoperability with their mission-critical push-to-talk server as well. So they are looking strategically at how they can keep an open standards-based approach to mission-critical push-to-talk, recognizing that not everybody is going to use their network number one or their app number two. They are looking at how LMR can be interoperable with mission-critical push-to-talk on LTE in the future, and they are open to working towards a solution for how talk group creation is managed between P25 networks and their LTE network. Those were kind of the high level. I got maybe not too technical, but a little more technical there. Does anybody have any questions or want to share their thoughts on the meeting? Dawn or Carl, to put you on the spot.
No, I think you summed it up fairly well.
Very good, and I agree with the notion that the core-to-core isn't going to happen. It may not be what we wanted, but we've got to fight the battles that we can potentially win, and that's not one of them.
Tony, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think you've done a great job, Kim, summarizing the meeting, and the key points that they raised. And, they were very clear about core-to-core. They're under no obligation to provide that with the contract that AT&T has with FirstNet. I think it was clear. There also was acknowledgement that, AT&T will never provide 100% coverage anywhere. Right, so they are going to have these issues to deal with, but I agree with you, Kim. Their approach to it is, well, we haven't faced a problem yet, so I don't know how to solve something that hasn't been presented to me. And I think we'll just have to continue to work with them as this gets deployed, and then we see what happens with other carriers in terms of what services they start to provide, and then hopefully get feedback from the first responder community as to what's really happening out there. Right, that's the best approach that I think we can take right now.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other comments from folks that went to the meeting? Questions or comments from people who weren't at that meeting on this topic?
Yeah, this is Joe Benkert. I understand they're not going to do core-to-core, and as I understand, core-to-core really isn't. It's a technical solution, but there are other solutions, and so that we may be better to face on functional issues. I guess I'm concerned about their saying that they don't want to address other interoperability issues until they arise, because the preferred way from my perspective to address it is fundamental. It has to be designed in from the beginning to avoid problems arising, not address it when there's a crisis, and for them to be sure they're working with other carriers and providers to avoid issues arising.
Joe, I think that's a fair point, and just for everybody's understanding, Joe is the legal counsel for the Boulder Regional Emergency Telephone Service Authority, or BRESTA, and he had contacted us with some questions about the FCC filing in the past couple of weeks, and some concerns, understandably, that still exist even in light of the OIT pulling that document, and then the FCC providing essentially closing that request, saying that it was possibly premature. So yes, Joe, I think we can't argue your points or argue against your point that there's concerns about addressing things after the fact, and then from a technology standpoint, if perhaps they've cost themselves time and money and impact to public safety operations with that approach. Another concern of ours is that mission critical services, the most of the carriers state that, hey, I can only manage things to the edge of my network, and it's not my responsibility once this data is off my network. For example, if an agency is on carrier A, their information needs to be passed to an agency that uses carrier B, and if it's mission critical data and those carriers are interpreting or managing standards differently, what that looks like, and we simply don't know how or when that will be a problem in the future. AT&T has said that they will be working towards the standards, at least with the mission critical push to talk, and as I think we see mission critical data and video standards being developed at the 3GPP level, it will be interesting to watch how those carriers address that too. We simply I think this group had decided that they were going to work quietly with the carriers to perhaps influence them more from an operational perspective going forward. And again, Don or Carl, not to put you on the spot, but that was kind of why this group was not going to take any more action. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, the direction I have from my client is to file a petition for reconsideration of the dismissal, given that other people had filed supporting comments, or essentially refile the same request, not as much on the core-to-core interconnection, but the functional interconnection. Is that in any way inconsistent with what you want to do with your positions?
Kim, this is Don. I think what they talked about on that, it's similar to what their answer was, similar to what goes on today, that you can have a Verizon phone talk to an AT&T phone. It doesn't matter what network you're on, that they will connect and there will be interoperability, that they are going to provide the same standards and there shouldn't be an issue. They said they can't control somebody else's network, and I agree with them on that. But as long as they're playing from the same sheet of music, and I don't see that they won't, that there is going to be interconnectivity on as far as they go. So I think we got the answers we need for now, and until they start producing into the state of Colorado, we really don't have anything else to give them.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any other thoughts or comments on the topic?
I mean, I would like to see more from them, but I think we're just going to have to wait.
Okay, Carl. Joe, did you have any other questions for the group?
Thank you.
Okay. The next topic on the agenda is the State Telecommunications Infrastructure Plan. Just a quick update on that for all of you. We are waiting to see what happens with transition, which is kind of our common answer. A bit of movement, though, is we have NDAs with a couple of the major carriers to share anonymized data with them so they can begin understanding where assets in the state might be that could benefit them and rural broadband deployment across the state. We have an RFI on the street right now to get information from industry around how industry would suggest the state run a program like that, whether the state ran the program or whether the state went to RFP and selected a partner to help them run that program too. And OIT has not made any decision. We're still in the information gathering place on that as well. We anticipate having to work with the legislature to make changes to that bill in the upcoming legislative cycle, and that will really empower OIT to implement that program in 2019. So that's kind of where that stands. On our SLEEP 2.0 projects, we are pleased to share that in the past few months, we actually completed a few procurements around the coverage assessment process. We've hired Back Signals Analytics to help us assess the data and aggregate it and create processes so our office can continue to assess, map, and analyze the data going forward in the future, whether it's gathered through devices that OIT provides from the grant in the short term, or whether agencies have data that they'd like us to aggregate and analyze in the long term. In order to do the short-term coverage assessment through the end of 2019, we've procured 6 Samsung Galaxy S9 devices with an app called Wind, made by a company called Solutelia, which does really some pretty incredible cellular coverage analysis, much more than what we need. But we'll have those devices available to deploy to agencies. And then we're also working with Wireless Advanced Communications to deploy Pelican cases with Sierra Wireless in-vehicle routers, mag mount antennas, and they can be deployed in vehicles to look at coverage from a different perspective. And they'll have the Sierra Wireless AirLink Mobility Management, or AMM, application on the devices that we'll be extracting that data from as well. We have to, we can deploy these devices with agencies who report coverage gaps in the existing FirstNet AT&T network, and those folks can be existing customers, or they can be people who desire to become FirstNet customers in the future. So if your agency or agencies you know of in the area might benefit from this, we have an online feedback form, or you can contact our team directly to participate in that. We also have the means to grab data from agencies that are already capturing it. And if your agency already has the equipment and the applications in your vehicles to do that, you can talk with us about that as well. Our 2 other major projects are data sharing, which we've kind of been waiting for, again, the transition to happen, but we've got to go ahead informally to really look at 2019, how we can support creating a legal framework for data to be shared between public safety agencies and mental health databases or professionals in an exigent situation where a public safety responder needs information about someone that they're dealing with, law enforcement, fire, EMS, and it could impact the way they decide to handle the response to a situation. And to remind you, this kind of was born out of, unfortunately, some of the officer killings in early 2018, and how mental health information might have changed or influenced the way they responded. So we're hoping to work with the AG's office to stand up a legal framework around which agencies across the state at all levels of government could inform the way they operate. And we'll keep you posted on that. We have to still procure, write an exact scope and then procure consultant services to support that. And then, Sarah, help me remember what the
The LMR to
Oh, thank you.
LTE
It's like I'm forgetting. LMR to LTE integration. We actually had a good talk with New Hampshire a few weeks ago, and they are in the process of writing an RFP to hire a consultant to help them figure out this LMR to LTE integration and transition in the future within the guidelines of the grant, which is a grant that allows us to plan for it, but not to technically implement something. So we're going to work with them to understand what they're going to procure through their RFP, and then what we're going to put in ours. And our hope is to get a consultant on in the first quarter of 2019 to help with those discussions in the state and have some sort of high-level planning or things an agency should consider by mid to late year. So those are our SLGP projects and our telecommunications infrastructure plan updates. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, and then the last thing under this area, I just provided you all a link. The NTIA published the final SLGP report for the initial grant on how that money was spent and best practices and lessons learned by states. If you have any interest in knowing how that $135 million initially, it ended up being about half of that because that money's been repurposed and we're spending it now on some of these other initiatives. But if you have any interest, that gives you a pretty short but high-level summary of what's occurred. Ed, I'll turn it over to you.
Just to let you know, if some of you are not aware, we started a Lunch and Learn series. And it's a great chance for you to kind of drill down on certain technologies. And so we've got one coming up. If those of you are on the screen, we have one coming up with Sonam Technologies. As you know, Sonam, we have a rich history with them. They started back the FIS World Ski Championship with us by providing devices and have done a lot for us since then. Well, they have some new offerings, some things that are pretty exciting. They have a new device called the XP5, and they have one that's called the XP8. These are Android devices, and anyway, they'll be talking about that. They also have something that's very exciting. One of the Lunch and Learns that we had was with a company called Beartooth Technologies, and Beartooth makes for lack of a better term, a dongle that can be paired with your cell phone, and it uses 900 megahertz to talk device to device. Obviously, line of sight is important. But anyway, on the XP8, XP8 and the XP5, they have a Beartooth dongle that has its own antenna that can actually affix itself to the device. And I'll just have to say it's pretty sexy. So you'll want to join us for that. The other thing that you may be very interested in is we're going to try and get the Lunch and Learn done early on in December instead of waiting till the end of the month, because I know a lot of you have family commitments and it's just a time for you to, just enjoy some time off. We're also going to have on December the 3rd a Lunch and Learn with Wilson Electronics. This one is an important one for those of you who are having issues, especially with communication in your vehicles. They have a new public safety offering that will extend the coverage inside of your vehicle. You put a little antenna on the top of it. So anyway, I encourage you to come for that. We actually have at least one kit that we can actually send out to you if you're interested in testing that. But join us for that Lunch and Learn. And then I'll just point you to our newsletter is going to come out, and it'll be coming out shortly. And we do have some blogs in there as we've done special projects, certain things that we've learned. As many of you probably saw last night, Channel 2 News did a article or did a story on the use of ATAC, and OIT, the Colorado Broadband Office, was involved with that at the Country Jam and Telluride Bluegrass Festival. So you'll find blogs about some lessons learned in those events. As always, if you know of any agency that has a problem that is dealing with either applications, devices, or some sort of capability they need that is related to broadband, if you would reach out to our office, because we are here to serve the stakeholders of Colorado and help them get the broadband technology solutions that they need. That's all I have.
Thanks, Ed. Old and new business. The first one I have listed, and we actually have 2 changes in membership to discuss, is Don Nacarato's retirement at the end of the year. Don, do you want to speak to that quickly?
Sure, Kim. I just want to thank everyone that's been on this committee from the beginning. This is one of the most important ones that I've ever served on for the state of Colorado and the next generation. And what's going to happen down the line. I think we've done due diligence on this committee, not to be roughshotted over take it or leave it. That we've done a yeoman's job to get the best out of what we could. Yeah, we didn't get everything, and we're never going to get everything, but stay vigilant, stay together. I think that's the biggest thing, that we do more as a cohesive unit than we do bickering amongst ourselves. I'm just proud to be a part of this, and good luck in the future, and I'm sure we'll cross paths somewhere down the line.
Thank you, Don, and thanks for all of your work and time spent on this. I know you made many a trip from Pueblo on this specific topic, and I think your input on behalf of the patrol and dispatch was really key. So thank you so much as well, and good luck to you in your retirement. You know, it's a public meeting in case you desire to call in February or May or August or November of next year. So.
Yeah, I keep getting that suggestion, but yeah, just know that CSP is going to continue to be a good partner with this group. Whatever information or data we can share with you, because we are a statewide organization and we have the resources and the ability to give you a statewide answer to things. And it's going to be set up and left where CSP will continue to be a strong partner.
Great. Thanks. And I believe, Don, you said that someone at CSP will be in contact with us, and I'll follow up with them at the first of the year after they name somebody acting, I presume, in your spot. So.
Yeah, that's correct, Kim.
Okay. And then I'm also sad to share that Sheriff Chad Day is outgoing Sheriff of Yuma County. And Chad, I wanted to thank you as well for your time and efforts and travel many hours. Travel and on the phone many hours to help us over the years, and you wanted to talk about who CSOC has named as your replacement?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. I speaking of administration change, I'm personally experiencing that as well. So my time on this effort has come to an end, and I wanted to pass along as well that it has been really great working with all of you, working with this team, and especially you and you, Kim, and Tony, and Ed, and Brian as well. If he were here, I would certainly say that to him as well. And it's been certainly educational for me as well. So I appreciate all of the effort that you guys have put into that, and the rest of the team as well. Realistically, the sheriff that I'm most comfortable in replacing me and representing sheriffs and law enforcement around the state is Sheriff Matt Lewis from Mesa County. And I realize this group already has some representation from Mesa County and Paula Creasy, and she does a great job. But I think Sheriff Lewis is appropriately equipped from a knowledge perspective and in kind of being aware of the a little bit of the history of the project, and not to get into it too deeply, but he's like I think probably most of us on this call and on this group are not necessarily a FirstNet fan, and so I think we'll be appropriately and intelligently skeptical about the kinds of things that they spread, and we'll do due diligence in determining how best to advise sheriffs and law enforcement around the state. So he will. I've already talked to him about it. He's willing to do that, and I guess as long as I don't know if he has to be officially voted in or whatever, but he's my pick anyway, and I'm the president of CSOC, so that's kind of a done deal as far as we're concerned.
Nope, there's no voting in, Chad. If you're telling us from CSOC that he's your selection, he's officially a member. So.
All right, sounds good. Well, he'll he'll have a lot of learning to do, but again, he's pretty well equipped for this. So I'm excited about how he'll carry on with the group, and I echo Don's comments as well, to encourage you all to continue down the same road that we've done, and be diligent to do what's best for public safety around the state.
Thanks, Chad, and thanks again. I think you provided a great perspective and some challenging points for them over the years, and it was great to have that as part of the conversation. So thank you very much.
You bet.
Another item under old new business, Tony, I'm going to put you on the spot just to provide a quick update on the actual operational review provided by AT&T to the governor proper.
Okay, yeah, as you guys remember, as part of the opt-in agreement, AT&T agreed to provide roughly twice a year operational review, and what we agreed on with the governor's office is they would do it in the form of a report. And we've been negotiating with them on the content of that report, and we're down to a couple of things that we're trying to work out right now with them. I've seen a draft of it, and some of the material that's in it is stuff that they actually shared at the meeting we had on October 1st. I'm anticipating that they will send a final report to the governor here very shortly. So I think we've gotten the last couple of things worked out with them. There's one item that I'm pushing them on in terms of information. So we're trying to sort through that right now. And I will say that there's, from what I've seen in the report, there's nothing, earth-shattering in it that's beyond what they shared publicly to this group at our meeting up in Boulder. Again, I think it's fairly early in the project. But what I'm trying to do is establish a process that hopefully will carry through the transition to the next governor, so that AT&T feels obligated to follow through on that commitment. So.
And we'll figure out what we can and can't share, correct? Based on. Okay.
Yeah, I think, again, from what I've seen of the draft, there's really nothing in there that they didn't share. They didn't give us copies, obviously, at the October 1st meeting, so this would be something that's, they would use being proprietary if they shared with the governor. We can probably come in and talk about it, because, again, I don't think there's anything in it that they haven't shared with this group. We probably just wouldn't be able to give copies to people.
Right.
But it would be something that the governor would have a copy of. So.
Okay. Any questions on that? All right, and then the last kind of old business that we had discussed briefly at one of the previous meetings was the long-term governance discussion across public safety communications in the state. In August, there was an update to the statewide communications interoperability plan, and that group through the PSCS, or Public Safety Communications Subcommittee, worked pretty diligently to try to bring in public safety broadband and 911 issues, and not just look at the world through the view of LMR anymore. Glenn Kleitch, the SWIC for the state, is working on that, and he's convening a discussion across 911, LMR, and then our broadband office, some stakeholders, to figure out how we frame that discussion for the incoming administration early next year. So we will probably just have some discussions around that with all of you via email in the interim. I don't see anything popping up in the short term about that. This group, as you recall, was open to figuring out how we might collapse into the PSCS at some point, because that might just make sense. But the PSCS may require some changes to their statutory structure at some point as well to reflect that and own this topic more wholly. They are under sunset review legislatively this year. They were reviewed by the auditors to do that sunset review, and they were recommended for renewal, but that has to be addressed at the legislature, and I believe passed in some sort of bill. So we might have an update at the February meeting on that. But that's the update on the governance topic. Does anybody has anybody had any changes of heart on that topic in the past 3 months? All right. Well then, the only other last item, are there any questions or general discussion for anyone? Okay, IWCE is in Las Vegas, March 4th through 8th. Our SLGP grant will cover funding for that if anybody desires to attend, so please contact our team offline if that interests you. Ed, do you want to promote Colorado Responder Tech Live?
Yeah, if I can get to my my notes real quick. We are going to have an event that's coming up in April, and I'm furiously looking for the dates.
8th and 9th?
Thank you, 8th and 9th. I knew if I said it slow enough, Kim would bring it out for me. This is it's going to be a little bit like XPSLTE, where we want it to be experiential. So we're going to de-emphasize, you know, a lot of the breakout sessions and plenary sessions. Not to say that there are not going to be any of those, but we really want this to be an opportunity for you to either come and stay the whole day and participate in everything, or if you just need specific technologies, like, hey man, I just need to talk to some guys that can help me with drones, or I need a specific application that'll do this, you'll be able to drill down with those folks and get some one-on-one time. So it'll be heavy in demonstration, heavy in hands-on. We also will have some inspirational aspects to it. The cost is going to be minimal, and so we want to keep the cost down so that that will encourage you to come. And
SLGP will likely cover it as well.
Right, and so yeah, we've had that discussion. So as those details are available, you know, that this conforms to SLGP and all that, you know, I'm sure we'll send you out some information so that you can get signed up for that. But the event too that I want to say is we're designing it so that not only is it going to be apropos for somebody on your level, but we also want just the average operational responder to be able to get something out of it. And so it's the focus is really top down as well as bottom up. We want to kind of complete that circle with this event. So please contact me if you'd like to get some more information, or if you have some idea on some breakout sessions that you think would be interesting and something that we really need to consider operationally in 2019 and beyond.
Thanks, Ed. And then the last item is that our next meeting will be Thursday, February 21st, and that's 2019, not 2018. Sorry about that. We'll do it by web or conference call as well. Anything from anyone else? All right, then we wish you a very happy Thanksgiving, happy holiday season, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, no celebration at all, Happy New Year. And I'm sure we'll be in touch before then, but we all wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.